Thank you, Sherry. It's an honor to be here today with you guys. It's a very, very important topic to talk about, and as was mentioned, something that's important to me. So thank you first to Sherry and to ASIC for your leadership in this organization, and to Jasmine, wherever you went to, for all the work that you've done on this book. Oh, in the back there. And Clint, I appreciated your words just now. That was very, very informational and helpful to me, because we need to talk more, actually. So, as your local member of Parliament on the west side of Saskatoon, I am very happy to be here with you today. My elected life has led me into the area of immigration. Now, I serve, as was mentioned, I serve as the Deputy Shadow Minister of Immigration and the Vice Chair of the Immigration Committee. And that, of course, is an inter-party committee in Ottawa that studies issues around the area of immigration. Now, just a quick, brief moment about who I am. I was first elected in 2019, as Sherry mentioned. Before that, I was a business person, and I was also, as she mentioned, involved in the bridge on 20th. So I had a pretty good perspective of sort of the inner city Saskatoon and what goes on there. Something that was important to me in caring for those people who need a little bit more help. My wife also, I'll mention her. She's a teacher at Prairie Spirit School Division, and for the last 15 years, she's worked in the area of newcomers. So essentially, when you're a newcomer family to Prairie Spirit School Division, you see my wife first. And she helps you navigate the system and integrate your children into the school system. And she also works with teachers who sometimes need help in instructing kids coming from a non-English environment. And so she really has been, for those years, a friend and an advocate of newcomers as they navigate, particularly the educational system. So for me, that was my first introduction to newcomers in our community, in our area. And so, I could tell you lots of stories about that, but it's interesting how that kind of led me into where I am today. So it's an interesting connection, and often we, at home around the supper table, can talk about kind of the same thing, because we do a lot of the same. And as was mentioned, in Ottawa, I'm the Vice Chair of the Immigration Committee. And I use a lot of that time on the Immigration Committee in the House to advocate for more resources for immigrants to come to Canada and to be supported in Canada. And an example of this is just a couple of weeks ago, I had the chance to lead off questioning to government officials with response to the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. And one of the questions I had been getting from my Muslim friends was, why is the government only matching money to Red Cross? Why aren't they matching money to other organizations like Islamic Relief and some of these others, Humanitarian Coalition? And so I asked that question, and then as it turned out, every other person that asked questions from all the other parties had the same question. And so just last Friday, actually, the Prime Minister made an announcement that he was going to expand the matching funding to the Humanitarian Coalition. So that was just an example of how advocacy in Ottawa can actually make a difference. Another thing that I pushed for was extension of program immigration measures for Hong Kong, for Afghans, and now Ukrainians. And I see my UCC friends here. This is the current issue now, is the QIT program is set to expire, and we need to make sure that gets extended. And so that's something that we on the committee can help push and actually shape policy. Another really interesting thing is, of course, in Iran, we have many people who are being held in jails and who actually are on death row. And so many of us in Parliament have sponsored people, Iranians, and actually some of us have had results where they've actually been released. And so, whatever extent, however small it is that we can help, it is a good thing. So that all leads me to the issue of foreign credential recognition. A year ago, this became very obvious to me that it was a problem in our country. And so I introduced a private member's bill, C-286, and it focuses on the economic hurdles that immigrants face in Canada regarding credential recognition. And this book today, the resource book that we're talking about today, is actually a great step forward in, as has been mentioned, in providing all this information in one place. So it's a very positive step. But the flip side of that, when you solve one problem, which is what this book does, it exposes other problems. And I think I've had a chance to have a sneak peek at the book, and when you look in there and start to look at all the requirements and all the hurdles that have to be jumped through, it becomes pretty obvious that there's another problem underneath all of this, which is all of the hurdles. And you can talk to any newcomer in practically any profession, and they will tell you of, the worst case, or the best case is, it might take months or a year or more than that just to go through paperwork, proving that this paperwork is right. Or the worst case is where you basically start all over again. I was riding in an Uber, being driven by a dentist from Iran in this case, and he had to start at the bottom, and he said, it's not worth it for me. He was a little bit older. I think he was in his 40s when he came to Canada. And he just took the approach that he was here for his kids. And so he's completely abandoned he was a dentist for 20 years in Iran, but he couldn't work as a dentist in Canada. And that's just wrong. It just doesn't make any sense. So recognizing foreign credentials is a complex problem. Immigration is a federal jurisdiction, but credential recognition is mostly the jurisdiction of the province. And individual regulatory colleges are in each province as well that control things. And so that's where we get these examples of doctors driving cabs and nurses working as home care workers or mechanics working as janitors. And it's a lot of red tape and regulation in providing the equivalency of education and the quality of foreign credentials. So what I'm proposing in my legislation isn't going to solve these problems completely, but it is a small piece of the puzzle to simplify how credentials are recognized in Canada. The bill is called the Recognition of Foreign Credentials Act, and it allows the minister to designate certain foreign credentials as equivalent to other credentials. Essentially, it eliminates the duplication of somebody having to have their credentials recognized if someone has already done it before. So if we know that this credential from India, for example, is equivalent to something in Saskatchewan, once that's been done one time, then you never have to do it again. Right now, every single person has to go through that process. So that's what I was proposing in my legislation. This legislation, though, can shave months or even years off of an immigrant moving into their chosen field. When I met with the Pharmacists Association, they told me that of 3 separate educational equivalency processes, pharmacists with credentials from outside Canada must go through. And depending on the province, it could be anywhere from 6 months to 18 months. So if my bill was in place, it could shave that all off the time. Now, I introduced this legislation in June, and actually since then there's been quite a lot going on. It wasn't even on the radar as far as I could tell too much. It was kind of bubbling below the surface. And I'm not saying that because of my work this has all happened, but it's, I think, just coincidental that things have been going on. But I give credit to my colleagues in Parliament and to provincial colleagues who have been working on this because it definitely is an issue. And if you look at the news just recently, Jason mentioned the story on the RBC study, and the headline there is, Canada is failing to put immigrant skills to work. There's a story in the Windsor Star last week, Ukrainians welcomed in workplace but still finding jobs below their qualifications. CBC said Canada is short of doctors and it's turning away hundreds of its own physicians each year. And just recently, the Minister of Immigration, I think in December, the headline there is Canada to spend $90 million improving credential recognition of immigrant healthcare workers. So everybody's kind of responding to this and thinking about this. And one of the easy statistics that we can all understand is doctors. And we all know we have shortages of doctors in the country. It's estimated there's 13,000 doctors in Canada who are not working as doctors, and a great many of those are newcomers or foreign-trained doctors who aren't able to work here. And that's just kind of silly when you think about it, that we have this great need for doctors. We have doctors in the country. It's not like we have to even bring them here. They're already here, but we just can't put them together, and we've spoken quite a bit about that today. And you can apply that to pretty much any profession, but doctors is really easy to understand. So I've engaged with all kinds of stakeholders on this, and it's something that they all support the idea of simplifying credential recognition. There's universal agreement on that. Licensing boards are where we get into a bit of trouble. And Clint, you would know far more than I do about this and some of the complications. But whether it's College of Physicians or nurses or pharmacists or the Union of Boilermakers, everybody has, they act sort of as gatekeepers. And unfortunately in today's Canada, it's the migrants, the immigrants, who tend to fill these jobs and aren't able to get there. If you look at the College of Physicians in Saskatchewan, it gives you a little micro view of the broader issue. Our province has on average about 100 residencies for doctors, and 5 slots are set aside for doctors with foreign credentials, foreign-trained doctors. Yet we have hundreds of foreign-trained doctors in our province waiting to practice who can't get licensed. And nationally, there's about 3,300 residency spots in Canada, and it's been like that for quite a while, at least 10 years. Around 5% or 150 of those slots are for immigrant or foreign-trained doctors. And yet there's probably at any given time about 1,500 people on the waiting list wanting to get those residency slots. So clearly there's issues. And again, I'm kind of talking about doctors, but really this applies to many different things. One of the first meetings that I took was with the Boilermakers Union when I became an MP. And this was before I was the vice chair of the Immigration Committee. And they were meeting with members of Parliament because the Boilermakers were working, the heavy-duty welders in the pipeline industry. And so one of their asks was for more temporary foreign workers, Boilermakers, to complete projects in Alberta and here in Saskatchewan. And they assured me, though, that these migrants would only be here for 6 months and wouldn't take jobs away from Canadians. But really, they need to grow their labor base just as much as we do. And so we need, rather than to bring in temporary people to fill temporary jobs, we need to find ways to allow them to work permanently here. So what's happening, though? There's lots happening. Clint told us, and I'm proud of my home province because I think they're doing a really good job in this. And I actually have an idea for your name. You talk about you talked about the money that you can get if you need to upgrade your credentials. That should be called Cash for Creds. So I know she haven't got your pen out, but maybe you want to. But no, there's lots of stuff going on in Saskatchewan, and Clint gave a great description of that. And you know, I just kind of summarized that by saying it's the province taking back some of the authority from some of these regulatory licensing boards to actually knock some common sense into people and get away from this problem of having trained doctors that we can't use, as an example. So, and to me, that's a clear signal that we need to start opening the doors a bit, or things will happen, or if government has to step in, they will. Ontario, I've spoken to the Minister of Labour and Immigration, Monty McNaughton, on several occasions. And they have also put their colleagues on notice in Canada's largest health district in Toronto and have started a pilot project for healthcare workers. And province-wide, they've gone to a blanket system for personal support workers. That is all healthcare workers that are not doctors or nurses. So we'll see how things shake out in Ontario. Nova Scotia recently started a program where a foreign-trained physician can work under an existing doctor for 12 months and then be allowed to practice in that community on a type of restricted license. And also just recently, the 4 Atlantic provinces signed a deal that allows doctors to cross provincial borders and backfill for each other. And that's actually a really important part of this puzzle too, because the lack of inter-province mobility of some of these jobs is a precursor to the problem of getting licensed in the first place. So I know that the Atlantic provinces have also committed to addressing the problem of foreign credentials too. So there is progress happening, but of course Canada is a collection of provinces and it's a bit of a patchwork thing, and so we get these regional solutions. But I think as we in government can push harder, we can help that area. So you need us as representatives, whether it's provincial or federal, to continue to advocate for newcomers so that they have access to the jobs that we need here in Canada. And the federal government has the power to work collaboratively with the provinces to provide some incentives perhaps, but also just to work on Canada-wide systems. And if it's done in a collaborative, positive way, it can be done. It can be done well. And my bill is an example of that, where it's a simple way that we can make things a little bit easier. But provinces have a huge incentive to do this because, you know, and again, to use healthcare as an example. And honestly, I think healthcare is a great example right now because everybody knows about it. It's putting a lot of pressure on the system, and the parties, I think, are willing to work together to make things happen. And so that's one way that we can take maybe a bad situation and get something out of it in a positive way that will help into the future. So, and provinces more than anybody want to solve this problem. So, and as was mentioned, all of this assumes that applicants have the appropriate training and qualifications and can speak English to the level or English or French to the level that's needed in Canada. So that's kind of assumed under that. So, as your MP for Saskatoon West, I truly believe that immigration is the key to Canada's economic future. We've heard that it's what's driving our population growth right now. And more than that, though, immigrants of every culture, race, and every religion enhance and enrich our society and our culture. I knock on a lot of doors during and between elections, and often it's, you know, thanks or no thanks. But if it's the door of an immigrant, it's often a conversation. And people have a genuine interest. They want to know what's happening. Whether they agree with my political views or not, they believe in Canada and they believe in our democracy. And they want to participate and often get offered tea or a snack or many times an actual meal. And it's hard to resist all this wonderful food as you go from door to door. But I get to know the concerns of newcomers this way. And what we need to develop are good relationships. And we all need to be doing that and encouraging our friends and neighbors to do that. And one thing I just want to mention that's important to me is that newcomers integrate into our city. You know, we need to make sure that we don't end up with clusters of people. We need to be together as a community. And so, you know, I'm doing a little bit that I can do. I work a lot with Islamic people, and so I work with them, and I do my best to integrate them with friends of mine and people from perhaps different faiths so that they can meet each other. Another thing that's happening right now in Saskatoon you may or may not know about, but cricket is becoming a thing. If you know what cricket is, a game. And so I've been involved with different communities, Pakistanis and some others who are really into cricket. And so I'm doing my best to push that. We're trying to have a little bit of a celebrity game maybe this spring with the mayor and a few other people, that just to bring that up a little bit and allow other people to integrate with some of our newcomers. So those kinds of things are important to me, because I certainly don't want to see segregation among our ethnic groups. It's not always easy, but that's why we have local organizations like this immigration partnership in Saskatoon to educate and help look for problems and fix those problems. And so, you know, congratulations on this book today, on this resource guide. It's a great thing, as I said. And it really does fill a need. When I saw it, it was like, wow, I've been trying to figure this out for the time that I've been involved in this, and here it all is in one place. So I really do appreciate that. So it's important work that you guys are doing, and I know you have some good partners that are working with you as well, and those are all critical. And I won't try to mention them because then I'm going to leave somebody out. And I know that it's important from the conversations that I have with newcomers as I talk to them. So it doesn't matter, though, how grandiose or well-intentioned our plans in Ottawa are, or even Regina for that matter. But if they cannot be delivered on the ground, then they're all for nothing. So that's why I'm glad that you guys are here, that you're doing the work you're doing. It's very important. And so I'm happy to be here with all of you today. So those are my remarks. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Okay. Why isn't there a credential verification process for SINP newcomers instead of them needing to apply to WES? And this actually gets straight to the heart of my private members bill, because WES is the company that you have to go through, or there's several of them, but they're the largest one, if you want to get your credentials recognized and equivalent, have an equivalent Canadian version. And so it can cost anywhere, you know, $300, $400, $500 and take, you know, a month or two or three to get that done. And so that's what I'm trying to eliminate, actually, through my private members bill, is the need to have to even go to WES if you already have something that's been previously checked out. So that is the situation there. What is the legislation at the federal level to address discrimination and barriers in hiring process among qualified and experienced newcomers and immigrants? Oh, that's a heavy question. I'm not aware that there's any legislation specifically aimed at that. It would be tricky to try to do, but I think the meaning behind this question is important. And I think we talked actually previously, Jason and others have talked about this, the need to educate, provide information. You know, I really like the discussion about the questions you ask in a job interview, because you know, that is something that you maybe don't think about, but in the perspective that was mentioned here, like, it's a big deal, you know, and so that is simply an education piece and an understanding that needs to be there. So I'm not sure necessarily that legislation is the solution to that problem, but certainly we need to do more education. That's why I'm glad to hear the Welcome Week that we're talking about here, and Jason, your comments about doing some educating or some panels to help businesses understand this, because as you said, businesses need and want properly skilled people to work, and often that could be a newcomer, but sometimes there's artificial or systemic barriers that we have that we just need to work through, and they can be, you know, relatively simple, like what questions do you ask on a job interview, to more complex, you know, how do you get your credentials recognized. But one other question that somebody wanted to ask, so I'll ask this question on behalf of whoever it was. What does our office do? I'm sure you all wonder what an MP office does. So I want to answer that question. Basically, our office exists to help people who are struggling in their relationship with the federal government. So what does that mean? Well, if you're, say, a newcomer and you're trying to get your PR card, and it's been 18 months and you still don't have your PR card, and you don't know what's going on, and you're confused and you need help, that's when you come to us as an MP, and all the MP offices are the same no matter who's there, no matter what the party is. And we have Daniel, actually, who's right here, works in my office. That's what he does. And so we have some special phone numbers and people that we can call in the government, and we can actually ask questions on your behalf. And we can often find out that, you know, it's stuck. Why is it stuck? Well, you didn't submit the proper paperwork, or they are waiting for something else, or they, you know, there could be all kinds of reasons. And so we aren't always successful, but many times we are, and we're able to dislodge that. So essentially the way to think about it is you're interacting with the federal government, you've run into a wall, you don't know what to do, and you don't know where to turn. You come to the MP's office and we will help you to the best we can. So that is what an MP office does. I know that was a burning question on all of your minds, so I wanted to let you know that. Another question here. What would your party do differently for recognizing immigrant education if there is a government change? Well, I don't want to get into politics because that would be not appropriate, I don't think, in this venue. But I think it's clear, and we heard that from Clint and the provincial government, and from some of the headlines even that I read you. This is an issue that's top of mind for many people. And you may not agree with what's currently happening in the federal government or whatever, but rest assured that there are many ideas floating around out there, whether it's in the current government or in a future conservative government or whatever it might be. Immigration has become such a critical part of our country's plan going forward that we have to fix these problems. And again, that's why I always use the doctor example, because it's just so plain and simple. We have doctors, we need doctors, we can't put them together. That's a very simple problem that there is a complex solution for, perhaps, but it still needs a solution. Any other questions? Anyone brave enough to go stand at the microphone? We have a winner.
Oh, okay. Good morning again. So nice to meet you, Brad. I live in the west side of the town, so it's good to see you in human form as against the pictures we've been seeing. So I wanted to challenge a question you said about West. So this is from my own experience. So when I got here to Saskatoon about 3 years ago, aside the immigration process of getting my credentials evaluated and everything, now with my employer, which happened to be City of Saskatoon as at then, they wanted my credentials. They wanted to do background check. So the shortcut for me was the West that I already had. So I currently work for a private establishment too, and I had to go through that process the second time. And they wanted to do a background check, and it was taking like 2 months. When I talked to people, they said the process normally takes about 4 months. So I spoke to the recruiter and my HR person, and they said, oh, well, what solution do you have? I said, look, I have WES, and WES is a credential evaluation, it's international standard, blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh, beautiful, I can submit that, and it was accepted. So for me, that's my experience. Mm-hmm. WES was my shortcut to, getting my credentials recognized by the employer. So my comment to your answer was going to be, if you're going to make changes in policy like that, I know probably this is something you do, but you need to bring along the employers as well in the process. So for instance, if WES is a restriction or a barrier for a lot of people, what would be acceptable in the place of WES that would make life easier for immigrants?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I spoke with WES about this. I was a little hesitant actually to speak with them about my bill because effectively it takes away work that they do because they won't have to keep redoing and they were very receptive to it. They thought it was a great idea. So, because they said, we're a nonprofit. We don't actually want to do all of this work. The short answer, though, is that it would be probably very likely WES that would do this work. And so they would be the ones, and rather than having to actually go through and do the work, they could just stamp it and say, yep, we know this, it's good, and you'd get the same paperwork. So that'd be the idea. But I also want to highlight one other thing that might not have come through quite clear enough in your statement, but in your question, you talked about having to redo and go get your paperwork again. And this is actually a huge problem. Sometimes it's very difficult because universities or others will require, certified copies, signed copies, things that are, official, because in fairness, we need to be careful about fraud. And this can be very difficult for a newcomer to go and get a document that's an original document that's verified or that's signed or whatever. And especially if you've done it once and now you have to do it again a few years later, now you got to go back through that whole process and find those documents. So this is a huge problem for a newcomer, and it's not a very efficient, and it's like, how many of us could go back and prove that you had a university degree? And actually, what would be the process for you to provide to me an actual copy of something that proves that you have your university degree? Like, it's hard to do, and imagine now you're in a different country trying to do that. So just wanted to point that out. Sure, let's see. Sure, let's do, actually these are all related. Thanks for mentioning that you're helping people from Iran, also any other nationality, to get their immigration status. Please share your opinion on what we can do for some immigrants who hold their PR status they left behind due to humanitarian, their status got expired, they're struggling, and they're waiting for travel document visas for years. Yeah, this is what we deal with in our office all the time, because in the last couple of years, everything's gotten so backlogged in the Department of Immigration that it's taking forever to get paperwork. And so I know that they're working hard to improve the system, but there's a lot of things that need to be done. One of the big things is the push to get things online. And I know one of the things that I'm pushing for is, you know how you go on Amazon when you have a parcel coming and you can go find it and you can see everything you need to know about your parcel? That's the way the immigration system should be. If you have your application in the system, just go online, put in your ID, your password, and you should be able to see not just the status of it, but if it's been reviewed by somebody, it should actually say, it was reviewed by Bob and here's what he said, and he approved it for these reasons, or he rejected it for these reasons, or, I mean, it should all be there transparently. And I know that is the goal of the department, and I think it's something that I am really pushing for. And it's not that is a long-term problem or a long-term solution, but it would make it much, much better. So that's part of it. And I think we need to do all we can to support people who are newcomers in our country, and that's why I appreciate this meeting here today and the initiatives that are being taken. And if we work together, I know that we can solve many of these problems and make it that much better for everybody, whether you're an employer or a person that's been in Canada for a long time or somebody new to the country. So thanks for all your questions.